Okay, in this tutorial I'll be showing you a basic introduction to 3D modeling inside of 3ds Max 2016. Before I start showing the basics of 3D modeling, I first want to cover some terminology, some common basic terminology that is used in 3D modeling. Now, before you watch this video, there'll be some videos that you would have had to have watched, which would be from memory, would be the introduction to the interface, and the other one was introduction to navigation, I believe. So those will be on my channel. You can search for those. I'll put them in the description as well. So make sure you watch those before you watch this video. This video will be a very basic one, so this is not an advanced tutorial, so this is for beginners. Okay, first of all, I'm just going to draw a box so I can explain this terminology a lot easier. I'll just change this color quickly. Don't worry about the things I'm doing right now. These things will be explained. I'm just creating this cube so I can actually demonstrate what I'm trying to explain. Okay, first things first, we have a cube in front of us, a 3D cube. One more thing, let me just change this color to black again. So we have a 3D cube in front of us, and it's made up of different faces. And the very first terminology that you want to get used to is polygon. Now, if you do a web search, a polygon is essentially an object that is made up of straight lines that form a closed shape. When talking about polygons when it comes to 3D modeling, most of the time when people say or mention polygons, they're referring to the amount of sides or faces, more so the amount of faces that the object has. So that's usually what it means when it comes to 3D modeling, or that's usually what people are referring to when they say polygon. So once you know what polygon means, which is probably the first terminology to know, you'd want to know what a face is. Now, if I select these individual faces, you'll notice they highlight in red, and this is a face. So what is a face? Well, it's just like a face is, this refers to any type of object that you make, whether it be a pyramid, a cylinder, things like that. It's going to have a face, right? Which are these things. So if I were to say create a pyramid, as you can see, these are the faces of the pyramid. So that's what a face is. The next thing you want to know is what an edge is. Now, edges are these lines, these straight lines in this case, that make up the faces. So all of these are edges. You might know of this from maybe from primary school when you learned about shapes and all that stuff. Next terminology is vertices. Now, the vertices are the point at which two edges meet. So as you can see, these points on our object here, it's where the edges are meeting. That's a vertice or vertex. Yeah, so that's that. Okay, next terminology, topology. Topology is when someone says, does it have good topology? What they're trying to say is how these edges actually flow through the model. So, say, create a couple of edges like such. Notice it's completely straight going around the object. This could be considered clean topology for a 3D model. When someone talks about maybe sort of messy topology or incorrect topology, it could mean something, say, like this. Like, notice how these lines are just all over the place, and that's not clean, that's messy, so you want to avoid that. Okay. So I think that about covers the terminology part, so let's get stuck into the actual modeling. When you want to start any type of model within 3ds Max, the very first thing you want to do is pay attention to this toolbar over here on the right of the screen. This is pretty much where you will begin to create your 3D models, and in most cases all 3D models, the advanced, the complex ones, all of those will be created using basic primitive shapes. So it's kind of just like art, any other form of art, whether that be drawing or you always start with basic shapes. So in some cases you might use a box, in other cases you may use a pyramid. It all depends on what you're modeling. So we'll start with the box. So the very first thing you want to do is hover your mouse over this option that says box and left click on that. Then position your grid the way you want it, and hold your left mouse button, drag your mouse out, and then let go of the left mouse button. And then to end the creation of this cube, you'll just click on the right mouse button. Now this created a perfect cube, but that's not going to happen by default. The reason why it's done that is because if I go ahead and delete this cube and click on box again, I have this option cube selected. Just make sure it's on box for now, because that's usually the default setting. Okay, we'll do this again. Hold the left mouse button down, drag. Now you notice when you drag your mouse in different directions, you can actually create sort of a different size base. So we're going to just do something like this. And then what you do is you let go of the left mouse button and you move your mouse up, okay? You're not clicking any buttons right now, you're just moving your mouse up. And then when you're happy with the height, you click on the left mouse button. Then to finish the creation, you click on the right mouse button. And there you've created your very first primitive shape. You may be wondering now, okay, I've created this shape now, you know, how do I actually modify maybe the length or the width or the height? There's a couple of ways to do this, but probably the easiest way to do it is click on this tab which says modify. So left click on that, and you'll notice we have some parameters, length, width and height. And now we can change that based on our, you know, what we want it to be like. So for length we can change this maybe to like 10, to width let's just say 20, to height maybe 50, just an example. And you notice how that's affecting now the size of that object. And if you wanted to create like a perfect cube, just enter the same number for each option. So let's go 50 for length, 50 by width, and 50 by height, like such. And there you go, we got a perfect cube now. Underneath you'll notice 3 more options. These are the main ones. Don't worry about these 2 at the bottom, I've never used them, but just focus on these 3 options over here. You got length segments, so SEGS, that stands for segments, right? Width segments and height segments. At the moment it's set to 1. Notice what happens when I click on this up arrow and continue to click on it. Notice how it keeps adding more segments. Same, let's go for the width, let's add 5. Notice how it's not adding more segments there. And let's go for the height, which I don't think it's really going to affect it. Oh, there we go, so it just took some time. So there we go, so now we have perfectly shaped faces with 4 sides by creating those segments. If you want to have no segments at all, the quickest way to do this is to right click on this icon. It doesn't matter what arrow you right click on, just right click on it and notice how it goes back to 1. So nice quick way to do that. So that's the basics of creating a primitive shape and then adjusting the parameters. We'll do the same with let's say let's go for a sphere, right? Let's drag out a sphere like such. Notice it has quite a lot of segments, and that's in order to maintain the shape of the sphere. Let's go to the modify tab again, and this is a little bit different. Now you can adjust the radius, the amount of segments, and there's a whole lot of options under here which I don't use too often, so I won't go into that, and it's a basic video so it's not meant to be advanced. So let's say you want to change the radius to say 20. Notice how the sphere becomes smaller. So the higher that number is, let's say you want to go 100, the bigger the sphere is going to be. And the smaller that number, the smaller the sphere will be. Segments are, as you saw with the cube, are the lines running down the model. So let's say we drop this down to 20. Notice how there's less segments, and also notice how the cube has gotten a bit more, you could say, blocky, not as smooth. And if we drop that even lower to say 10, notice there's going to be less segments and it's not going to become so much as smooth as before. You could drop all the way down to like 5 and you'll notice now it's not really a cube anymore. So that's how you can modify the cube primitive to your desire. All these other shapes have similar parameters. Let me just do a tube with some differences, of course. So you can modify, once again, depending on the object that you're making, there's different parameters you can modify for that. Okay, so that's the basis of creating primitives in 3ds Max. Let's see what else we can now do in terms of modeling. Okay, an important thing now, go ahead and create a box. Doesn't matter what size it is, just go ahead and create a box. Now, at the moment, this is just a very basic box, and you really cannot modify it at all. There's no, apart from actually modifying the length, width, and height, there's nothing else you can actually modify. And of course the segments as well. So, if you want to, be able to actually move these vertices around, maybe extrude some faces. And for those of you who don't know, extrude is where you click on a face and you click on this setting, which allows you to extrude this face outwards in the direction it is facing. Of course, that will change depending on the setting, but we won't go too much into that. So that's the box there. Now, if you want to actually modify this box further, you need to right click on the box, hover your mouse over Convert To, and select Convert to Editable Poly. There are other options here which I never use. I mostly just Convert to Editable Poly, and this is the accepted standard. Click on that. Notice now we got a new tab under Modifier. So it's not the original Modify tab where you could modify the length, width, and height. Now it's actually changed. We got a whole range of options now. If you scroll down with your mouse, you can see a whole range of options. Let's go over all these options, and I may leave out some that aren't really necessary and that I don't really use it often. First things first. In this section here, it's where you name your primitive object, right? This is the name you give it. So let's just give it box and press enter. So we've named this object box9. As you can see, it has their labeled box as well. The modifier list. I'm not going to go into the different modifiers in this video, but if you click on this arrow, drop down arrow next to where it says modifier list, there's a bunch of modifiers you can add onto your object to change certain things, but I'm not going to go into that in this video. Next, you'll see a title that says editable poly. Editable poly now means that this polygon is editable, and you can now modify it. You can move points around, extrude faces. Underneath, you have different titles for vertex, edge, border, polygon, and element. If you click on vertex, notice how you see these little blue dots around your model. As I explained in the terminology section, those are your vertices, right? It's also highlighted this option which says vertex, which is pretty much vertices, but you don't say I have one vertices, you say you have one vertex. When you have many vertices, you say, like that. So that's why it's labeled vertex. So this is a vertex, that's a vertex. This is made up of many vertices. Okay, so next you have edge. And as explained in the terminology, your edge are the lines that make up the faces. The border would be, say, this entire around this face. So I'm just going to delete this face just so I can demonstrate this. Notice now when I've clicked on that, it's now selected the border. Now it won't select the border if there is a face already making up that area. So notice when I now try and click on that, it's not going to do it. So it only really works when you don't have a face, when there's no face there at all. The next one is polygon. Now remember in the terminology where I described polygons as being basic shapes, but then said that in terms of 3D modeling, polygons are usually used to describe the faces that make up the object. So here we go, we've got polygons, 4-sided polygons, as you can see, there we go. And we can go now to element. What element is pretty much, it will select the entire object. So you click on one face, doesn't matter which face you click on, and it will select the entire object. So that can become useful in certain situations. Okay, let's continue moving down. This option I won't talk about because I don't really use it often, but the one beneath it, ignore backfacing. Now probably the easiest way I can explain this is, say I'm going to go to the front view, right? And now this shape is not 2D, it's just because it's a front on view, so it looks 2D, it is still the same 3D object. Let's say I wanted to select the face on this side and the face behind it. So I'm just going to go left click and drag my mouse like such. Then I'm going to press P on the keyboard to go to the perspective. And notice how it's selected everything. Why has it selected everything? Because the element mode is still on. We want to go to the polygon mode. So go back to the front view, click anywhere on your viewport to deselect your object. Now do the same thing and press P on the keyboard to switch to perspective view. Okay, now notice how it's selected all of those objects over there, but not the top ones because we dragged all the way across like that. Let's go back to the front view, deselect that object, and let's select this option which says ignore backfacing. Let's do the same thing. Let's go to perspective mode. Notice how the face on the back was not selected. So whenever you have ignore backfacing enabled, depending on the view that you are on, the face directly behind that will not be selected. So that can be useful in some situations, but you can turn that off for now. Okay, by angle, I don't use this, so I'm not going to go into that. The shrink, the grow, the ring, and the loop tools can be very useful, but you have to have something selected in order to have all these options created. So I'm just going to select this face first as a demonstration. Shrink pretty much will decrease your selection amount. So if I click that, notice the selection goes away because there was only one face selected. If I click on grow, it's going to grow the selection and it's gone for everyone except for the face at the bottom. If I click grow again, it's going to go on all of them. Now if I click shrink, it should deselect it, but because it's got everything selected, it doesn't seem to be doing that. But say if you only had this selected, it will shrink that. Ring and loop. These tools generally only work when you have edge mode enabled. So click on an edge on your object and then go ahead and click ring. So just one edge of your object and click ring. And notice how it now selects all the objects within that ring, as you can see like such. So that's a way where you can say if you want to draw a segment going from all the way like that, you can go ahead and ring it and create a line going down there. Loop, click on that. Generally, like with a loop, I don't really use the loop tool, at least this loop function. I believe it works more so with when you have edge loops and stuff, but I don't use that tool really that often, so I'm not really going to go into that. Preview selection, I don't use this, so I won't go into that either. Soft selection, I don't use these often, so I won't talk about that. Edit edges. Okay. Insert vertex, I don't really use that. Remove, split, don't use those tools either. But I'll talk about these tools because these tools I use a lot. the extrude. What is the extrude tool? Well, I mentioned extrude before, and what I said was it enables you to pretty much extrude a face, so move a face outwards in the direction that it's pointing. So I'm going to click on extrude, but I'm going to click on this icon next to where it says settings, where next to the text extrude. I'm going to click on that, and notice now how it's extruded that face out. And it's also presented you with another a range of options. First thing is you're going to be able to select how you want that polygon to extrude. So if you click on this drop down arrow, you can extrude it by group, local normal, or by polygon. Generally, when you extrude in, you usually would just stick to the default, which is group, which will simply just extrude the face out in the direction that it's facing. So say you had, let me just demonstrate this a little bit better. Say I'm going to drag in maybe a, let's say a pyramid. Just drag a pyramid out like such. And I'm going to convert this to an editable poly so I can actually extrude one of these faces, and I'm going to extrude by group. Notice how it's extruded in the direction it is facing. Okay, so let's go back to this object. Now, just quickly, when you have two objects, say you have, you know, a vertex selected, or you have a face selected in this object, you're not going to be able to click on this object. You're not going to be able to select it until you deselect all your selection modes, and then you can click on the other object. So once you have that object selected again, let's go and extrude. Okay, local normal is used when you want to extrude in the direction that the normal is facing. So I guess I'm trying to think of a good way to demonstrate this. Let me see if I can take this box maybe. Let me just say extrude this. Maybe move it downwards like such. Okay, say that you wanted to have this face extruded, but you wanted these lines to run straight in this direction. So if we extrude by default by group using the group option, it's going to still extrude straight ahead like it did before. If we change that to local normal, it should have actually, okay, no, okay, that's not going to work in this instance. I'll have to find another way to demonstrate that, because that hasn't worked out so well. But we'll come back to local normal. Okay, by polygon, so let's just undo that. By polygon, the best way to explain it is to literally just demonstrate it. So I'm just going to select, say, you know, I'm going to go ahead and click on element and select every single face, and I'm going to go ahead and say extrude, although I'll have to first convert it to a polygon selection. So one thing to note is when you want to extrude multiple faces, you can't do that within element mode. So here's another very useful trick. If you want to say, okay, you've selected, you know, everything in element mode, now you want it to be in polygon mode, but if you click that, it may not always maintain your selection. Now it has in this case, but not always, so that's fine for now. So just click on the polygon selection there, click on extrude, and now we're going to go ahead and click on by polygon. Notice how it's extruded the faces but individually, so not as one whole object. So this can be extremely useful in many situations, so definitely a very useful tool that. So that covers, apart from, you know, the local normal option, covers most of you know, extruding and all that stuff when it comes to basic primitives. So we'll move down to outline. Okay, I'm not going to go into that because I don't use that. Bevel. Bevel is the process of, you know, extruding, say, a face and making a sort of rounded edge. So I'm going to go ahead and click on bevel. Now notice how, let me go to the front view. Notice how this isn't completely straight up like it was before. And the reason for that is because it's now beveling. So there's multiple options. Once again, you'll have those three options where you can go by group, local normal, and polygon. And you can now adjust the height of the bevel and the outline of the bevel. So adjusting the height of the bevel is going to adjust how much the face will extrude by. And adjusting the outline is going to adjust how narrow that face will become. And let me just go to my perspective view and show you that there. So you see how it becomes more narrow as I'm adjusting this. And then of course you can adjust the height again, and you can sort of play around with this to create different different types of bevels. So that's very useful. So let me just exit out of that one. Inset. Inset is another tool I use all the time. It allows you to pretty much inset a face onto itself, and this is best described by demonstrating. So I'm going to click on this icon next to where it says Inset. Notice how it creates another face within that face, and it's also created these lines connecting this face to that face. Why has it created this line, and why has it not just created the face itself without these lines? Well, the thing is, 3ds Max likes to work let me explain this a little bit better. 3ds Max likes to use objects that have 4-sided faces. It works the best that way, and all the tools within this this toolbar here work best when your faces are made up of 4 sides. And we'll get into that maybe later in this video, or maybe in another video. So what 3ds Max is doing is it wants to maintain 4-sided faces. So that's why it's put this line in there, because if the lines weren't there, the face wouldn't be 4-sided anymore. So let's go ahead and we exit that. So that's what Inset does. One more thing. Once again, you'll have the option to either do it by group or by polygon. So let's demonstrate that. Let's say we're going to select just these faces over here. We're going to say Inset. Notice how it's kind of created a, maybe I would say, an undesired result. It's not really what you would use the Inset tool for, and I've never really done it before, doing it this way. So usually when you want to inset many faces, but you don't want it to be like this, you should say by polygon. And now notice, okay, this looks a whole mess. It just looks messy as anything. Don't freak out. What you want to do is right click on these arrows. Okay, you've right clicked on that. Now change this. It is definitely by polygon. There we go. Okay, make sure that's by polygon and not by group, because group will do the same thing as it did before. Click on by polygon. And now when you adjust these, notice how now each face is having an inset, as you can see, like that, is being inset. So that's also very useful, and it's very similar to how you can extrude each individual face without having to do it one by one. Okay, next is bridge. In order for me to demonstrate this, in fact, just I can do it with this object. Just delete a face, any face. It doesn't matter what face you delete. Click the delete key on your keyboard. You can zoom in a bit if you want. Bridge is bridge tool. The best way to describe it. Imagine having 2 poles, right? And you want to build a bridge so you can walk from the one pole to the other pole. So essentially, this is what you're doing. But it only works, or at least I believe it only works when you're in edge mode, because you're only bridging edges. Okay. So let's say you want to close off this, this hole, this gap. Select one of the edges and select the edge that is opposite it, right? Like such. And click on the bridge tool, but click on the settings. Notice how that has now created a polygon from this edge to that edge, and it has now filled in that gap. In terms of bridge edge segments, now these are the tools, additional tools. In fact, I'm not going to go over these because I think it's a bit too much for this video. It's meant to be a basic introduction. I may go over those in a later video. Don't worry about that. Just worry about the fact that you can bridge between 2 edges when there isn't a face over there. Okay, connect is quite useful as well. Now, connect is actually probably one of the most important tools in 3D modeling because it's used so often. Say, let's say we want to select this, right? This edge over here. And let's go back and let's ring it. So let's go ahead and ring it, and there we go. We've now selected all those edges. But we want to draw a segment going around those. So what do? Well, we have to click on connect, and let's click on the settings. Notice how it's now drawn an edge going all the way around. And this is very similar to, if you remember, when we were doing the basic primitives and adjusting the parameters. We can now adjust how many segments we want to go through those edges that were selected. Not only that, but we can actually adjust the pinch amount. And let me demonstrate what that does. So as I go and decrease the pinch amount, notice how those segments are getting closer together. And as I increase the pinch amount, they sort of spread out. Another option is slide, and this will allow you to slide all the selected edges along your model. So that is a very useful tool as well. And that is probably, in my opinion, one of the most important tools. Not the most important, but one of the most important tools when it comes to 3D modeling inside of 3ds Max. Sorry. Okay. These I'm not going to go into because I don't use them that often. Okay, under the Edit Geometry tab, under where it says Constraints, what this does is it allows you to move an edge along a 3D object without affecting the silhouette of the object. So let me just let me go ahead and scroll back up, create, let's say, maybe two segments, and once again you can right click on these arrows to reset the value to its default. And I'm going to change to vertex mode. Just click on the vertex icon, and so I'm going to move this just in any sort of direction, maybe something like that, very distorted. And let's say now I'm going to take this vertex, right? And let's say maybe I want to move this vertex down over there. Let me try it. Okay, that's not exactly what I want. It's still affecting the silhouette. I can kind of do this, but may not be what I want. Let's go ahead and change the constraints from none to edge. Let's see what happens now. Notice as I'm moving the vertex, it's moving it along that edge as best as it can. And this is a bit better to do than having to try and manually do it. Now, as you can see, if you try and manually do it when you have edge enabled, it's going to go all crazy, so don't try not to do that. You usually only would manipulate it using these arrows, probably the best way. So that's the way you can now move a vertex along an edge, as you can see, like that. And it tries to constrain it to that edge as best as possible. But now click back on none, because in most cases you're not going to use it all the time, and that's the default option or selection. Okay, let's scroll down. I'm not going to go into the create collapse functions. I will go into the attach and detach. Let me see if I can just undo this. And okay, we'll just undo that. I'll go into some modeling tips and tricks and stuff like that after I've explained this menu very basically. Okay, let's scroll down to where we have these attach and detach options. So, attach allows you to attach pretty much two separate primitive objects. So first thing you want to do, deselect all your selection modes. Click on any object. Make sure you have two objects within your scene. Go ahead, click on attach, and now it's going to be highlighted in blue. This is to tell you that, okay, the attach function is enabled. Now tell me what you want to attach this object to. And we're going to select this pyramid. Notice how not only have I attached those two objects together, but I've actually now, those two objects share the same color, and it will now enable you to move these objects together in unison. I will deselect to show you again and just select the cube, and notice how I can now move these objects together. Not only that, when I now enable any one of these selection modes, I can now manipulate not only the cube vertex, but also the pyramid vertex. If I were to undo that, Notice how I'm clicking on the cube, but I can't actually select anything on this pyramid because it's a completely separate object. Okay, let me just attach that back to actually just redo that to show you something. Okay, that's not working. Let me just go ahead and attach that. Okay. Let's say you've attached two objects, but you've changed your mind. You actually want them to be detached. So that's where this option detach comes in into play. But you want to detach this entire object, so you have to make sure it's the entire object is selected. And remember how I said in element mode it selects everything, so that is the best selection mode for this situation. Let's click on that pyramid. Let's scroll down and click on detach, and you can now name it. So let's just say test, and click on OK. Now notice how those two are now separate. I can now go out of all my selection modes, click on the pyramid, and now it's on its own. Okay, let's continue down. I'm not going to go over these. What I will go over is the Make Planar tool. And for that, I'm going to have to adjust this cube a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move that edge out like such. I'll move that out there as well, and maybe I'll move this out. Okay, so we've distorted the cube a bit, or the box, but I want the box to be, I don't want these edges to be like this, or these faces. I want these faces to be at 90 degrees. I want them to be flat. How do I do that? First, make sure that your polygon selection mode is on. Click on one face at a time, and then you'll have these three different settings, X, Y, and Z. As you can notice, with the arrows we have that X, Y, and Z. This will be the direction that you would want your face to become flat. Usually, I sort of try all of them until I get the correct sort of result that I want. So you could do that as well. So let's say, we want to make this planar, we want to make this flat. Let's click on Y. Notice how now it's made that face flat. Let's say, what, I want this to be flat as well. I'm going to go ahead and click on X. Notice how it's now made that face flat as well. And you look at this side, okay, that's fine. That's nice and flat. But this side, it's not flat. I want that to be flat. Let's go and click on X. Notice how now all faces are now flat. So that's also a very useful tool. Okay, let's continue down to View Align, Grid Align, and Relax I don't use. These are very useful actually. The Hide Selected, the Unhide All, and the Hide Unselected. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on, say, that face. Let's say, we want to see inside this object for some reason. But this face is getting in the way. What can we do? We can delete it, but then we'll have to bridge those two edges to create that face again. Okay, what else can I do? Okay, here we go. How about we just hide it? As simple as that. We've just hid the face. Now we can see inside of this object. Okay, but wait, the face is gone. What do I do now? Well, simply just unhide all. And there you go, your face comes back. It was never deleted, it was just hidden. So you could see inside of that object. So that's very, very useful. The third one, which is hide unselected. Say you select this face, but you want all the other faces to be hidden. Click on hide unselected. Now it's hiding all the faces that weren't selected. If you want them to come back, just click on unhide all, and there we go. Very useful tool. Okay, I won't go into the name selections. Polygon material IDs I won't go into for this video. Smoothing groups I won't go into either for this video. The vertex colors I won't go into. Okay, the rest I'm not going to go into. So that's the very basics of this menu. Now, I'm debating whether I should create a separate video in terms of the actual modeling process, or if I should keep it in this. I think I'm going to create a separate video, so this was more so a very basic introduction to, I guess, the tools available to you within 3ds Max when it comes to modeling and how to create basic primitive shapes. I'm going to create another tutorial which we'll then sort of demonstrate how you can use the different tools to create different shapes and things like that. And I'll go into maybe more depth to modeling and stuff like that. So I hope you have enjoyed this video. I hope it was clear enough to understand, and hopefully this is going to help you to improve your 3D modeling, or it's going to help you to, if you're a beginner, to actually understand how to model for the first time.